All right, let's finish up our discussion of population, talking about population pyramids. All right, we know that population pyramids give us a little bit of structure to the population, right? It tells us about the content of the population. On a population pyramid, typically on the left side, you have the percentage of population made up by the male population, and the percent on the right side, the percentage of population made up by females. The bottom, across the bottom, gives you that percentage, and then the top or the sides will tell you the age. Typically, it's divided up into 5 years of age, so 0 to 4, 5 to 9, and on and on and on. Right? It'll tell you how many people, what percentage of population is of a certain age, and how many people of that age are a certain gender. Right? We have in the one that you have here, you have the Japanese population in 2010, right, and the population of Angola in 2010. Angola is a Western African country, right? So what do you need to know about that? Well, first of all, you should pull in on the knowledge that you already have. Japan is a core country, right? We know that it's a country that has an aging population, right? Angola is a peripheral country, right? So there are certain expectations that you will have regarding those particular population pyramids. All right, so let's look at the Angolan population, right? And immediately you see it's got that very traditional triangular shape. It means it's heavier on the bottom and on the top than it is on the top, right? So if we want to look at this, we're going to look and see that they have a very large younger population. Right? So where are you going to put them? If you're asked to put them in a stage in the demographic transition, you'll probably put them in stage 2. Right? It's going to be an agricultural country where children are a necessity. Right? Also, probably if you look at the population pyramid, you can start to see that after the age of about 15, 20, right, that the population pyramid starts to contract quite a bit as it gets smaller and smaller, and you don't have a lot of people that are living into old age, right? So what kinds of things can you draw from this, right? You want to say, well, that they have a very large child population, agricultural country, high child mortality rate, probably a high total fertility rate. Also, too, you're going to start talking about young age dependency ratios, right? Where you have a large number of children who are in need of things like schools and daycare, and hospital and other types of services that are only needed by children, right? And so they are being supported by that working population 15 to 65. All right, so you can talk about all kinds of lovely, pull from all kinds of different areas as far as this type of population is, right? Typically, you're going to see a fast-growing population because we have a fairly high death rate that's still going down, but still a very high birth rate. All right, look over at Japan, right? We've got that, it's no longer like a treetop or a triangle. It's kind of that funky vase-looking thing. You've kind of got some indentures where you have less, for whatever reason, less population at that particular one. It could be that there were less populations, particularly if we're looking here in this middle section, right? The 45, 55 age bracket. There could be all kinds of reasons why there were less births. 45, 50 years ago, there could have been some kind of pandemic or a war, right, that would have caused that indenture right there, and then you see a whole lot of births going on here, right? And so there's a lot of reasons why a particular one may indent like that. But what we're going to see is a couple things. You have a very large middle area here, right? So at one time the population rate was growing much faster, but now it's retracting as it gets down into the lower ages. So we are having fewer children, right? This is a shrinking population. The growth rate is getting smaller, right? It's contracting, as you see right here, right? Here's a stationary population, almost that rectangular that we talked about before, right? But you have less children being born. So here you're going to see an older age dependency ratio, right? A population that needs to have nursing homes, different types of medical care, right? So you're going to be able to talk about, that older age dependency ratio, and how is it that a country like Japan is going to fill in with more workers as this population here starts to age out, right? Most countries do it with migration, which we're going to talk about in just a second, right? Japan is kind of moving, in that direction. All right, let's talk about the couple of last terms: population densities and sustainability. Right? When we've talked about population density before, the first term we used was arithmetic density. That's the number of people per square unit of land. Right? So if I took a land by acre, or if I'm using some other, we're just going to stay with acre because it's easiest. Right? How many people will live in that? The more densely populated a country, the higher arithmetic density. That's a good starting number. It's not necessarily the best, because we know that in the United States, up here in the Northeast, we're going to have a very high arithmetic density. But if we're over here in Montana, Wyoming, it's going to be a very low density. Right? It's a very general number that gives you general information. Right? It does not tell me where the population is condensed, where it's more dense in a country like the United States, and where it is less dense. Right? We can talk about physiologic density, the number of population divided by the amount of arable or farmable land. Right? Can give us some information about whether or not a country is able to support the people who live there. Right? Are we able to feed the people who live in that particular area? Again, much better information than just strictly arithmetic. But we know that in the United States that we are able to feed an awful lot of people on a very little bit of farmland, because we have access to technologies like mechanization, chemicals, and what have you. A country over here on the other side of India, Bangladesh, has a lot of farmland, but a very high physiologic density. And they still have a very high level of poverty. Great farmland, and they're able to support a lot of people, but there's still an awful lot of people that they cannot. All right. Sustainability kind of really talks to us about whether or not we can sustain that population. Right. So it is much more than just arithmetic or physiologic density. It is also about the resources that we have. Do we have enough water? Do we have enough farmland? Do we have enough land for people to develop and live on? Right? So can we maintain a dense population? And how long can we maintain it? How much water do we have? How much resources do we have as well? One more thing, and I didn't put this slide up, but I know it's in your book, and you guys will remember it, when we talked about the historic population centers of the United States, and how our population is trending, because we're going to talk about migration here in a minute. We know that our nation starts here, and this is still where most of our population is located, in the northeast area of the United States. But as we have purchased more land or taken over more land, our population center moves, right? It moves. It has moved to the west as people have started to move. Farmland gets crowded. It gets too expensive. Let's move out here, right? The United States also engaged in the Homestead Act, right? Gave people 160 acres of land if you just lived on it, right? So people would move this way. But as our population is growing and our population is migrating, right, we are not just moving west anymore, but we've noticed a trend probably starting around 1920, 1930, right? Where's my little quick? There we go. It has moved not only to the west, but also to the south, right? Our population is moving from our industrial center, now the Rust Belt, to the Sun Belt, right? An older population wants warmer climates. Other population wants the jobs that are being created in the south and the southwest. So our population is moving there as well. All right. The last thing we're going to talk about, right, is migration. Migration, of course, is the movement of people from one place to another. And as we talked about before, immigration is moving into a country. Emigration, exit, moving out of a country. And there are different types of migration, right? We have international migration, where you move from one country to another, right? Sometimes you'll see it called transnational migration. You have internal migration, like we just talked about, where people from the north, the northeast, are moving to the south and west, staying within the United States, right? So it is internal. You can also break it down even more into regional or interregional migration, right, where people move from the northeast region to the south or the southwest region. Right? When we talk about migration, we're going to talk about different types. You have forced migration, where people are forced to move. They are forced to move because because of the government, because of a natural disaster. All right, but forced migration basically means that you have no opportunity to decide to move or where to move. You just got to go, right? Voluntary migration is where you have a choice, where you can sit and think about where you want to go and why. Most migration is neither forced nor voluntary. Sometimes there's some, mixture of the two. Like we talked about before with the Irish potato famine. The Irish had to move. There's an element of forced migration, but they were able to decide where they wanted to go. And so they weren't being, at gunpoint or because nothing was there. They had to go, but they were able to decide where. When we talk about migration, we talk often about push and pull factors, right? Push meaning pushing me out. If we look at Syria and the Civil War, being pushed out. Pull factors pull you into a place, right? So I've got a better job, a better opportunity, right? That's a positive thing that pulls you in. A lot of times there's a mixture of both, right? When we talk about migration also, remember that you have refugees, people who have a well-placed fear of going back because of some natural disaster or some war or some government persecution, right? They are different from asylum seekers, right? Asylum seekers have a fear of death, right? Of being put into jail or persecuted because of their religion, their culture, or what have you. We've also talked about legal and illegal immigration, right? Those who have come following the laws and those that don't. Every country has the right to decide how they want to deal with their migration, whether they want to leave it open or whether they want to put on some restrictions. When we also talk about migration, we remember this vocabulary as well, right? Step migration, not so much a problem anymore, but people used to move in steps, right? Because they couldn't afford to necessarily get to where they were going. And a lot of times they would come across an intervening opportunity. Stay here and work. So they'd stay for a while. Go back and remember the alchemist, right? The alchemist made his journey and stayed in places for a while so that he could learn or to get money or what have you, right? Chain migration, we've talked about that with regard to predominantly the eastern areas of the world, Asia, Southeast Asia, with a lot of the Chinese immigrants that moved to various places around Southeast Asia and then wrote to their families, right? Said, come on, this is a great place. I've already set it up. Come and see me. All right. I think that's going to be the end of our discussion on migration. All right. You guys have a little quiz. After that, it's 11 multiple choice ones. You'll need to finish that and upload it. The answer, it was a test, so it'll upload for you anyway. All right. And then next time we're going to move on to culture. If you have not, please do so at this time and go to the AP College Board YouTube channel. They have 2 45-minute videos on population. Not so much explanation, I think, as much as practical using this explanations. So go there, see how you're doing, and then let me know if you have any questions.